Welcome back to Everyday Economics, the podcast that helps you learn about the economic world happening around you every day. I'm your host, Chris Krug, Chief Executive Officer of the 501c3 nonprofit, nonpartisan Franklin News Foundation. Everyday Economics is a production of America's Talking Network. You can subscribe to all of our podcasts at americastalking.com. To support Everyday Economics, please make your tax-deductible charitable contribution by clicking the link in the show description. We're recording this episode on Monday, January 29th, 2024. And joining me, as always, my friend and colleague, Dr. Orphe Divounguy. Dr. O, I'm going to start with a statement. Rent has always been expensive. But right now, it really feels like people are suffering on the rent side. Rents are absolutely not in the favor of those who are seeking places to live. And part of that's driven by, a supply-demand issue. Part of that is driven by wages not yet catching up with the cost for housing. What are the other factors and what's going on in this space right now? I know this is an area that is up your alley and a big passion of yours.
Look, it is true. So I wrote a report last year saying something like 19 million Americans were rent burdened. And rent burden, the definition from, I think it's HUD, was, if you spend more than 30% of your income on rent, then you're cost burdened. And so 19 million households, 19 million renters were cost burdened in 2021. And we're now in 2024, and that number has jumped to 22 million Americans, right? The number of rent burdened households has gone up by 2 million people in the last 3 years. And a new study was just released by the Joint Center for Housing Studies at Harvard University. And so, of course, like I mentioned, I did something for Zillow on the Zillow research website on the same topic. And so I'm very familiar with the fact that the increase in rents during the pandemic really pushed rents so high that it's really, really squeezed a large number of American families.
I'm looking at the report and the second paragraph, and you're talking about the Joint Center for Housing Studies at Harvard. I'm going to read something from you because I think it's relevant. So this is under a little heading. It says, rental markets cool after overheating during the pandemic. And I'm just going to read the first two sentences here. Rent growth has almost completely stopped following historically high rent increases in 2021 and 2022. In the third quarter of 2023, rent growth plummeted for professionally managed apartments to just 0.4%, down from 15.3% in early 2022. So what we've just talked about to this point, and then that finding would seem to be in conflict, but they're not. And so could you explain why they're not?
Absolutely. So rent growth refers to rent increases, right? So rents have increased and they continue to increase. In other words, if rent growth is positive, greater than zero, then your rent is still increasing. And because they increased so much during the pandemic, and back in February of 2022, rent growth was on a year-over-year basis, right? Rents had increased on a year-over-year basis by 16%. Imagine changing apartments or rental housing, right? Or a single family home rental, and having to go out in the rental market and facing a 16% increase at a time where inflation was soaring, right? The price of everything else was also increasing rapidly, and your income was not keeping up with the increase in cost. So the fact that rents increased so much in the past couple of years means that even if rents stayed the same, right, rent growth fell to zero today, then, all it does is allow incomes to catch up. It doesn't suggest that rents are falling. But I got good news. The good news is in the multifamily sector, you do have some pretty strong cooling. So we're talking about apartments. In the apartment space, rents are cooling on a monthly basis, and annual rents are down to 2.7%. Right now, remember, 2.7% rent increase on an annual basis at a time where wages are increasing above 4% is a good thing, right? So again, what I was saying earlier is that with wage growth above 4%, your labor income is catching up faster now, right? Is able to grow faster and so play catch up to the rent increases that you had in the past couple of years. And so you have a situation where rents are still very high and burdensome, but finally the strong and resilient labor market, the cooling rent increases coming from a lot of multifamily construction and apartment building during the pandemic has made it possible for incomes to play catch up, right? And so that's the positive out of this. The negative, of course, is rent is still very high and so many families are still burdened. If we can continue to see the labor market as strong as it is right now, and people can keep their jobs, then of course that could help, right? That could help alleviate some of the burden. Of course, what we are going to need at the same time is a continued increase in the supply of housing in this country. The housing market is severely underbuilt. We came into the pandemic with a massive housing shortage. And by housing shortage, I did a little exercise on this. There are way more families. In 2021, there were 4.3 million more families in need of housing than there were housing units available. In other words, even if we were to say to give everyone money to go buy a home of their own or to go rent a home, there just wouldn't be enough homes to go around for everyone. And I say that, and I usually say that people would actually have to wait maybe even longer if we went out and gave everyone money today, right? If we came up with some sort of subsidy for housing, it just wouldn't be enough because, there's just not enough homes out there for everyone. So that's the problem. We need to continue to build housing. We saw an uptick during the pandemic, but then we started to see a slowdown again. As the Fed raised interest rates, financing costs went up for builders pulled back. But I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful because you start to see interest rates ease a little bit. You see the 10-year has eased from its 23-year high in October. Mortgage rates have eased. And so that easing is going to help. You're starting to see builder sentiment improving as well. And so going into 2024, I am hopeful that we'll see more new construction to absorb all of the demand for housing that's out there.
Yeah, and this is a frequent refrain from you that, there's just not enough housing. And I think that that's probably undeniable, like, at a statistical level.
The worst part about this whole situation is that Zillow research actually shows that when rents go up really rapidly and when the rent burden exceeds 32% of income, the homelessness numbers just jump. And again, even in the, Joint Center for Housing Studies, new research, a record number of people are experiencing homelessness. You get a surge in evictions. You get a surge in the number of people that can't afford a rental of their own. And you see a lot of people ending up homeless. And so that's why it's absolutely critical that we build more housing in this country.
Appreciate your thoughts as always. We'll call it to an end there. For Orphe Divounguy, this has been Chris Krug. Subscribe to Everyday Economics and dozens of other high-quality podcasts at americastalking.com.
Get creative with Skillshare. Explore thousands of hands-on creative classes with one inspiring membership. Watch, play, learn, discover. Follow the link in our show description to join Skillshare today and get 1 month free.